I think a huge make or break element of policy design for all of these different authorities to be considering is either the economics and the bill credit rate, the sort of value at which solar and community solar specifically is compensated. So I mentioned that VDER, value distributed energy resources in New York. There is also a VOS or VOS, value solar tariff in Minnesota, which has been pretty successful. So getting that right and really incorporating all of the value that solar brings to the grid is essential in quantifying that and quantifying the environmental values accurately and fully.
Today on the Clean Power Hour, community solar in California and beyond. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Welcome to the Clean Power Hour. Check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Please give us a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify. That helps others find this content. My guest today is Kelly Roache. She is the Director of Policy and Community Solar for Renewable Properties. Welcome to the show, Kelly.
Thank you for having me, Tim.
Really excited to learn more about Renewable Properties. You guys are a well-established solar company in some markets, not a household name here in the Midwest, but I look forward to learning more about what you're up to and especially geeking out on what's going on in the California community solar market, because it is, as I like to say, very ironic that we don't have a great community solar market in California yet. Maybe that's coming to us soon, hopefully. And, when I think and write about community solar, I think of Colorado, I think of New York, Illinois, Minnesota, but not California. Why is that, and what are you up to at Renewable Properties?
It's a great question. I guess I'll just start with a very brief intervention on Renewable Properties. So we do have some work in the Midwest, and I'm hoping we'll become more of a household name there in time, but our solar developer working on a kind of community solar to sort of small utility scale solar development. So about the 1 to 20 megawatt range on paper, but really specializing in that 1 to 10 megawatt range. And we are active in New York, Maine, all over sort of the East Coast, and hopefully New Jersey as their program comes to bear. Certainly California's home base, have a lot of experience and assets there, and then some of those other markets you mentioned as well, Minnesota, and I think increasingly Illinois as that market takes off.
And before we geek out on the California market, tell our listeners a little more about your background. You have an extensive background in clean energy, but how did you come to clean energy to begin with?
Yeah, I kind of came through it through the lens of policy. So my academic background and originally my work background was in foreign policy. Studied and worked throughout the Middle East and South Asia. Increasingly became really seized by many of the issues domestically as well that were facing us, and particularly the very existential threat posed by climate change and the ecological crisis. And so started kind of working in policy in the solar field, and specifically community solar. I guess that was 2016, so about 7 years ago now. And I've been in one way or another kind of working in the renewables space ever since, kind of through social enterprise or nonprofit, investigative research, and now back solar industry side.
I love community solar because it truly is a democratization of solar, right? You don't have to own a rooftop. You don't have to have a shady roof. You don't have to install equipment on your building, right? You build a central facility, hopefully near a community or near a population, but these community solar projects are spread all over the states where there's good legislation. It is only happening in certain states. I mean, technically there are 20 plus states now that have good community solar legislation, but there's really only a handful of very active markets, and then a short list of burgeoning markets. There's some new entrants, like New Mexico has a pilot program. Here in Illinois, we got a market in 2017, really took off in 2019 as far as construction goes. And then it busted as soon as it boomed, really. And now we have new legislation, which is fueling a second wave. So it is a spotty market, but a great market as far as I'm concerned, because it's truly distributed across the landscape. These are 5 to 50 acre solar farms that then any resident in a particular jurisdiction, like in Illinois, we go by IOU territories, investor-owned utilities. So if you're in Ameren territory, you can subscribe to any community solar project in Ameren. If you're in Northern Illinois, the same for ComEd, Commonwealth Edison, the major IOU in Northern Illinois. So, yeah, tell us a little more about what you're charged with at Renewable Properties, and then let's talk about California, because it is a very strange market with regards to community solar.
Yeah, yes, it is. I failed to mention New Mexico. My kind of rundown of states where we have made a lot of strides. So thank you for putting that on the table as well. And yeah, my charge is on the policy front, very much the top of the funnel in the development process, in helping to monitor and to some extent shape new markets for development, for community solar, for ourselves and others in the development community, understanding where to strike next, and then throughout the entire development life cycle, of course, supporting all the regulatory questions and compliance and strategy around incentives, things like that. And then on the community solar side, I also work on a little bit later in the development process to help us either acquire customers or build relationships with other organizations that acquire customers for those community solar projects.
Excellent. So California, it is the oldest, most mature market for solar in the U.S. There's a lot of reasons for this. One is it is the tech hub of the United States. Solar is technology. Even though solar was invented in New Jersey in 1954 at Bell Labs, and energy is expensive on the West Coast, and that's a good combination. So anyway, solar really took off in 2010. Of course, it was happening before that, but it was very expensive, and so just not really in the mainstream. Now it's truly gone mainstream. You can install solar almost anywhere in the United States. It's just a question of what are the economics, how quick is the payback, and can you save money by installing solar? And that's true now in many markets, which is wonderful. And globally, if you don't know this, if you're listening and you don't know this, solar and wind are the fastest growing sources of new energy on the grid globally, solar being number one, and then wind number two. So solar is truly coming on to the scene as a mature technology and eclipsing fossil fuels very quickly. And in markets that are more mature than the U.S., like the EU, like Europe, solar and wind now exceed fossil fuel generation. So it's just a matter of time before, in the U.S., we go to a 80% wind and solar grid. We're at about maybe 5 or 6% solar today in the U.S., and we're going to go to 50% by 2050. So we're going to see a 10x increase in solar. So huge growth opportunity, which means a great opportunity for landowners, for residents, and of course for people who work in the clean economy. But let's talk about California. What's the story?
Yeah, it is fascinating. So solar, of course, as you mentioned, there's a lot of sunshine and a lot of solar track record and installations in California as the state leader in the U.S., but the market has struggled around community solar. So there was a set of programs that came to fruition as a result of legislation in California around 2013. The one I'll really focus on is sort of called Enhanced Community Renewables, or ECR. I think that's kind of the best. There are many flavors of community solar, but maybe the best proxy for the type of community solar paradigm that we think about in other states, where you have a solar farm or solar garden that's owned by a third party, and you're having subscribers who participate and receive financial benefit from those projects. There are a number of challenges, but one is certainly around the bill credit. I think that something you said, Tim, that's really important is that subscribers and energy customers need to save money to participate in these programs. When energy prices in particular, you've seen have been high, it's hard for people to envision kind of paying more for clean energy, even if they're really committed to supporting and participating in clean energy programs. So that was a failure with the green tariff community solar programs in California to date. The ECR program, the issue is that the kind of bill credit that forms the basis of the economics of these projects was set very low during implementation by the California Public Utilities Commission. And as a result, it has been very difficult to kind of make the economics of those projects pencil while still providing a savings to customers, which is critical. So tough for both developers and for customers to benefit in that market and through that program with the bill credits that can run a wholesale price rather than robust retail price or something closer to that we see in a lot of markets where community solar has been successful and has flourished. So that is one issue. There are kind of other charges related to that. In California, there's kind of a charge for departing load from the investor-owned utilities called the Power Charge Indifference Adjustment, PCIA, which has been a struggle for some of these California community solar programs. But now we have kind of another shot to get it right with the more recent legislation where the bill credit will have an opportunity to come before the California Public Utilities Commission and to right that among some of the other issues. I guess just a pretty stunning statistic for you around ECR, that Enhanced Community Renewables program is, to date, and kind of the whole universe of community solar programs that were authorized in California, the amount contemplated was up to 600 megawatts. And that includes a couple different programs, but ECR as well. And to date, as of the most recent quarterly filing from the utilities in California, there were 0 megawatts that were successfully developed through that program. There are, few that have been procured, I think around 30, 40 megawatts that have been procured and may potentially still come to fruition. But that's a pretty, I think, stunning indictment of the success of those programs to date.
I can't claim to really understand all of that, but let's talk about the future. Your CEO, Aaron Halimi, just recently penned an article in Renewable Energy World. So check that out. It's called How to Design a Successful Community Solar Program in California. It references AB 2316, a new community solar plus storage law that sets the stage for creating a viable community solar program for all Californians. So the problem is getting fixed. What's the story with AB 2316?
Yeah, a tremendously exciting development. One of the most exciting opportunities in the California solar landscape and certainly community solar in a decade. So now the legislature has done their job in passing the bill. What the bill states is that now the California Public Utilities Commission is going to evaluate the existing community solar programs, the sort of green access programs, ECR, and this green tariff shared renewables program, determine how effective those have been. And then they have the authority to then propose, either make changes to those or propose kind of an entirely new community solar program. So that process has kicked off and proposals have started coming in from all different stakeholders in this process, from the industry, from utilities, from consumer advocates and ratepayer advocates, environmental groups. So that is all being laid on the table now. And the procedural schedule is such that we're hoping by, looks like the third quarter of this year, there could be a proposed decision from the California Public Utilities Commission, CPUC, and legislatively they have to either have something in place if they plan to, or complete their evaluation of these existing programs by sort of mid-2024. So we're hoping to see something even sooner based on that procedural schedule, but then the commissioners will vote on that decision, and you certainly want them to take all the time needed to form a well thought out and really workable program. But this is kind of an opportunity to start fresh in some ways with the elements of the program design that have failed in the past.
Cool. I see that there are specific call-outs in the legislation for low and moderate income populations and energy storage. Do you want to comment about those types of call-outs or carve-outs and the importance of those?
I do. I think it's great, and we're really excited to see both of those things. So one, in terms of, if you think about California and the amount of solar that's deployed, how really important paired storage is going to be, in particular, trying to shift that curve. Already there are proposals to, incentivize kind of more richly kilowatt hours to align with peak usage in California, which is, I think, now between 4 or 5 and 9 p.m. So storage is really integral to that. And we're happy to see storage specifically named in the legislation as kind of a tool to pair with community solar. And as with regard to, the focus on low to moderate income populations, I think that's really essential. The bill states that at least 51% of the program will need to serve low to moderate income people, which is great. And that may be on a project basis, that may be on a program basis. That's something that's still being worked out at the commission through the implementation process currently underway. But California has a lot of renters who are disproportionately low to moderate income population and who are definitely a population, I say as a renter myself, who can benefit heavily from community solar, not being able to otherwise install renewable energy. And just from an equity point of view and justice point of view, I think it's really important that people who have been, most impacted often by climate change and who are living closest to impacted communities have the opportunity to financially benefit and to participate in the clean energy economy. So that's all great news. And it certainly aligns with some of the federal initiatives we've seen in tandem as well around the Inflation Reduction Act and some of the goals and incentives around working with and serving low to moderate income customers and communities with community solar and other renewables.
Indeed. It's so vital that solar is accessible to all groups, especially those who are most impacted by climate change, which certainly will be low and moderate income people everywhere. It's only fair that we give everybody a fair shot at the clean energy transition. So this is vital. With regards to storage, every state goes about this differently, but you do see carve-outs for incentivizing storage. In Illinois, we don't have storage necessarily attached to community solar, not legislatively. We do have a very generous storage incentive now, $250 per kWh. What can you say about the importance of storage, and what are the trends, I guess, that you see when it comes to attaching storage to community solar in particular?
Yeah, and that in Illinois, I know that functions as a rebate, is kind of the structure for the storage incentive, though I also know there may be further proposals and legislation coming down the pike that would expand that with regard to community solar as well. So we'll all have to see how that plays out in Illinois this session. I think trends-wise, what you typically see is that it's really the more mature solar and community solar markets that are really being very intentional about building in a storage component at the programmatic level. New York just released a storage roadmap at the very end of last year, and that is something that's now an active proceeding before the Public Service Commission in New York, and we'll see an order from them hopefully by mid-year that will authorize some incentives specifically for storage that can also be coupled with community solar. Which is a great strategy, in particular as the kind of way incentives for community solar are structured in New York is their declining block incentive that has stepped down over time. So as that step down continues, thinking about storage as kind of a way to revitalize or continue robust development in that state, I think is really promising. And in California, again, they're just kind of starting from in some ways, not a lot of successful community solar development, but just a very high penetration solar market compared to a lot of other states. So I think it's really essential, and hope more states will continue to take it under consideration, not just kind of as a phase 2 or phase 3, but really building that in from the start.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Clean Power Hour or viewing it on YouTube. We do have a great YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed, please go to cleanpower.group and hit that YouTube icon and subscribe to our channel. Of course, you can find all of our content on your favorite audio platform as well. So please give us a rating and a review. Back to the show. Yeah, I like to encourage my colleagues in the solar industry to become storage experts if they're not already, because solar and storage are a very good pairing as well with wind, right? Because these are intermittent resources, solar and wind, and then you can store the extra energy, and there is lots of extra energy coming from the sun, plenty of energy to capture in a battery, and then use that as a value stack, as a sponge, if you will. It can receive energy, it can give energy. It's instantaneous. It's available 24/7 as long as you put enough energy into it. So anyway, you mentioned New York. I think of New York as one of the better community solar markets in the U.S. It's not without its challenges. It is a complicated market. It is a difficult market to operate in, but most of the serious community solar companies are giving a shot at the New York market. Compare and contrast, I guess, New York to other markets. Why is New York what it is today?
Yeah, I think, it's the market I've had the pleasure of seeing mature over time from the very beginnings of, pilot program that came out of the reforming the Energy Vision program, which was sort of a wide scale, did a lot of different things, but a really response to Superstorm Sandy here, and a lot of the devastation. I'm in New Jersey, that definitely lived through that in a coastal community that we saw here. And so that CDG pilot, it's community distributed generation, what they call community solar in New York, has really grown and been given the license to grow over time, and to become, I think, a little more sophisticated as well, transitioning from just kind of a retail rate, sort of, virtual net metering tariff to now something called the value distributed energy resources, which is a little more certainly complex, but also a kind of tariff that builds into it locational price signals, time-based price signals, environmental value, of course, the energy and capacity values, and kind of summing those all up into a value stack, which is how these solar projects are compensated. And that has had to be tweaked and improved over time. There's still tweaks and improvements that I think it would benefit from. But that has been the mechanism through which so much solar and so much community solar has been built in New York. We're now, according to New York regulators, we're now over 6 megawatts. And sort of they had a number of plans, but the 6 megawatt goal was kind of the most recent until last, very end of 2021, and then authorized in 2022, an expansion to a 10 gigawatt distributed generation goal, and putting really funding and incentives behind that, which I think is critical. That as these markets mature and transition, if you want those resources to be built and deployed, you have to put the resources there to do that. And so incentives for not just kind of at a base level for building community solar, but also we've seen newer incentives come around for serving low to moderate income customers. For instance, the inclusive community solar adder, which about, I think, 400 megawatts of that came flying off the shelves last year. And we hope to see more of that this year. And they're also kind of locational based, or I guess, citing specific adders in terms of brownfields development. For instance, I know they've proposed a new floating PV adder, which is pretty interesting. I think a sort of technology or subgenre that we're all learning about. So New York has been, I think, successful in resourcing the work in creating a tariff and refining a tariff that works, and then also is not really a capped program per se, in that, of course, there's only a certain amount of incentive there, but there is the ability to develop as many megawatts of DG as the grid can support, and I think that's been a tremendous boon to the community solar industry, as we've seen, 6 and now marching towards 10 gigawatts, yes, planned and installed.
Do you know by when is that 10 gigawatt mark?
That's supposed to be by 2030.
Okay.
But they kind of started up again with the funding and incentives that would take us from 6 to 10 gigawatts last, late spring, early summer. And we are currently just in November hit the sort of mid-program mark for that expansion. So in about 6 months' time, about half of the resources that are meant to incentivize that additional 4 gigawatts were expended. So we'll see if it takes us all the way up to 2030. I think it's a good problem for the state to have in terms of the proliferation of solar development.
Yeah. 10 gigawatts is a lot. I mean, the whole U.S. market, the whole install base of solar in the U.S. is just over 100 gigawatts, if I recall correctly. Is it not about 100 gigawatts?
That sounds about right. It's definitely a leading market, and you see definitely Massachusetts is another market leader. I think Illinois will not be too far and continuing to grow behind that. So we would love to see California added to that list.
Yep. So I guess the question begs, what should energy professionals and authorities having jurisdiction, organizations like the Illinois Power Agency and NYSERDA, the CPUC, what should people really be thinking about when it comes to laying the groundwork for a successful solar program, A, and B, what should they avoid? Unfortunately, it's a lot easier to break things or stop them, sometimes purposely, sometimes accidentally. But it's vital that we are constantly sharpening the saw and improving the landscape for the development of clean energy projects, right? Because we have to decarbonize the economy in the next 20 years. And it's a huge task. It's totally doable, but it can happen, but only if we do things, smarter and faster, so to speak. So what is on your mind, I guess, about the future of community solar and how can we do it better?
Yeah, I think all across the board in all aspects of program design, right? What we want to see is our programs that are transparent, that are predictable, and that are just. And I think there are a couple elements to that I can elaborate on a little bit more. I think a huge make or break element of policy design for all of these different authorities to be considering is either the economics and the bill credit, right? The sort of value at which solar and community solar specifically is compensated. So I mentioned, that VDER, value of distributed energy resources in New York. There is also a VOS or VOS, value of solar tariff in Minnesota, which has been pretty successful. So getting that right and really incorporating all of the value that solar brings to the grid is essential in quantifying that and quantifying the environmental values accurately and fully. And so that's something that will be definitely a big part of the program design in California pursuant to AB 2316, and looking forward to seeing a more robust consideration of that than just kind of the wholesale rate would provide. So I think that's really critical. And kind of a similar follow on to that idea of being transparent and really predictable is thinking about the size of a program and how that's allocated. I think one area where we've seen a lot of programs struggle has been this kind of boom bust cycle or start stop nature that may result from having a certain, okay, we're gonna do 200 megawatts through an initial procurement or through an initial tranche or something like that, and then there's going to be some kind of waiting period while it's determined what the future of the market's going to look like, and that can be really disruptive, and it can be really difficult to plan for developers for kind of how to build pipeline in a state in a market. And I think that it's just really ideally, right, we're kind of letting, and sort of whether an uncapped or kind of not artificially capped amount of market capacity to come and serve customers. There are certainly many customers, more customers who are not served by these technologies than there being kind of a glut. So I think that's kind of less of a concern, and we're more erring in the direction of more restrictiveness or kind of a lot more start-stopness. It's also really difficult, right, for labor markets and for making sure that we're able to make investments in people learning trades and being trained in solar installation and in the professions that are necessary to build solar projects, and just having a really clear view into future kind of market development and ongoing market development is really important for those careers. So I think that's a really critical part of it as well. So those are two big ones I would call out for sure.
Let's talk about that human capital side of things. You can have the best legislation in the world, but if you don't have the trained installers to build this infrastructure, that could be a major roadblock. And, the IRA legislation does throw money at training programs, which is great. And we have kind of a burgeoning ecosystem of organizations that are helping to grow that population, both among regular populations and low and middle income. I recently learned about Climate Corps, which is recruiting, I think, mostly inner city youth into, becoming solar installers and paying them a living wage, paying them $20 an hour to become a solar installer. So that's a very good thing, right? We want to see more living wage opportunities for our youth across the board. And then, once they get into clean energy, there's many more higher wage opportunities once they become seasoned professionals. But how do you see this landscape from a workforce development perspective?
Yeah, it's absolutely critical, like you said, and there are specific call outs within the Inflation Reduction Act around prevailing wage and making sure that these are well compensated jobs. And also in that California legislation, AB 2316, there's also mentioned that these projects should be built at a standard of prevailing wage. So those are encouraging things to see. I think a lot of programs across the country are adopting that in one form or fashion, New York as well. So I think that's a trend, certainly. And it's like you said, the sort of scale that we are trying to approach from where we are now to where we want to be in 7 or 10 years or beyond that, we need a lot more professionals in this field. And it's great to the extent, too, that projects are able to incorporate a workforce development component. The recent New Mexico Community Solar RFP, for instance, it's kind of a non-price process for the requests for proposals for projects to participate in that program that highlighted a lot of different kind of both economic and environmental justice aspects. But one was if there was a workforce development component and training component to some of these projects that were participating, that those projects would be scored more highly and given more consideration and weight. So I think there are a lot of different ways that regulators are approaching that, and certainly that these are, jobs that see as appealing career tracks, whether or not it's something that they contemplated themselves in. I mean, I think working on a very different side of the industry, but I never really thought I would end up working in clean energy, coming from a foreign policy background. And I think there are just a lot of needs and a lot of different facets and faces to the renewable energy space that if you can kind of any skill you can think of, there's a job.
Yeah, a statistic that I've glommed onto is that we need 1 million electricians to come into the clean energy transition here in the coming decades. And that's a big opportunity. You know, you can get into a training program with a high school education and be making six figures as a trained electrician, building all kinds of infrastructure, not just solar. I'm biased. I want to see them building solar farms, but and rooftop solar. So, well, what else should we talk about, Kelly? I really enjoyed this conversation. If there's more that our listeners should know about renewable properties, I'm happy to have you tell us about that or anything else on your mind about community solar.
Yeah, I'm sure you have a lot of renewable energy professionals from different walks of life listening to your show. And very much we're always looking for, partnerships with, folks who are kind of aligned and doing similar work in the industry. And we work together with EPCs and have bought projects and acquired projects and work with, as I mentioned, I work with a lot of subscriber organizations who are helping us to identify customers for these projects. So I think continuing to connect and grow that ecosystem of all these different organizations that are part of the life cycle of making a project is really essential to meeting our goals as an organization, meeting our goals as a clean energy economy. So just welcome folks to connect on those opportunities.
Excellent. And I want to give a shout out to a couple of organizations that I think are vital. First and foremost, SEIA, the Solar Energy Industries Association, but also the Coalition the CCSA, Coalition for Community Solar, what is it? Access.
Community Solar Access. Yeah.
I can never remember what that stands for.
Yeah, they're indispensable organization, absolutely doing critical work to advance these priorities at the federal level, state level, and bringing together a lot of developers and other parties.
Yeah, you can find them at communitysolaraccess.org. And then there's ILSR, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. They've been tracking the growth of community solar programs, and I find that they have some of the best up-to-date information on their website. That's ilsr.org. So, Kelly, how can our listeners find you?
My email and my phone number are on our website, which is renewprop.com, renewprop.com. So can certainly find me there on LinkedIn as well. Would love to connect with folks, and you'll see we're active posting a lot of company news on LinkedIn lately.
Excellent. Well, I'm Tim Montague. You can find me at cleanpowerhour.com. Please connect with me on LinkedIn as well. Give us a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify. That helps others find this content, which is so vital. And reach out to me. I love hearing from my listeners and hearing your ideas and suggestions for future topics and guests on the show. With that, I want to say thank you, Kelly Roache, Director of Policy and Community Solar at Renewable Properties, for coming on the show today. Thank you. And I'm Tim Montague. Let's grow solar.